When I found out my daughter had put a hex on me, I immediately invited a priest to bless my house. It wasn't a suspicion or some flight of fancy brought on by old age. It was a cold, hard fact. I found the little pouch tucked under the liner of my sock drawer, filled with what looked like dried weeds, some sharp bits of rock, and, God forgive her, a clipped snippet of my own hair. Taken, I suspect, from the brush on my vanity. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't my Brenda. My daughter, the one who used to make me macaroni necklaces and draw crayon pictures of our family, wouldn't do this. But the evidence was right there, nestled between my wool winter socks, smelling faintly of dirt and something bitter, like burnt resentment. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now, let me start at the beginning. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 68 years old, a widow for the past 5, and I live in the same sprawling 2-story house in Ohio where my husband, Frank, and I raised our only child, Brenda. The house is too big for me now, I'll admit. The stairs groan under my feet in a way they never did before, and the silence in the evenings can be deafening. But it's my home. It's filled with 35 years of memories, from the pencil marks on the kitchen door frame tracking Brenda's height to the faint scent of Frank's pipe tobacco that still clings to the curtains in his study. Leaving this place would be like carving out a piece of my own soul. Lately, though, things had started to feel off. It began subtly. A string of bad luck you might just brush off is life. My favorite rose bush, the one Frank planted for our 20th anniversary, suddenly withered and died despite my best efforts to save it. Then the refrigerator went on the fritz, spoiling a week's worth of groceries. A few days later, I took a silly tumble on the back steps, thankfully just a bruised hip and a sprained wrist, but it shook my confidence. I'm a practical woman, always have been. But even I had to admit, the hits were coming a little too fast and furious. All the while, Brenda was a constant presence, her voice dripping with a syrupy concern that had started to feel suffocating. "Oh, Mom, are you okay? You need to be more careful," she'd say over the phone. She started dropping by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house with a look I couldn't quite place. Not loving, not nostalgic. It was more like she was assessing it, appraising it. Brenda, at 42, was going through what she called a spiritual awakening. It involved a lot of flowy clothes, incense that smelled like a campfire doused with cheap perfume, and a new group of friends who called themselves enlightened. She'd talk endlessly about energies, auras, and the universe providing. The universe, it seemed, had yet to provide her with a steady job or the ability to manage her finances. She was always short on cash, a situation she delicately referred to as being between cycles of abundance. Frank and I had always helped her, of course. We paid off her credit cards more times than I could count and co-signed on an apartment she couldn't afford. Frank used to call her our perpetual graduate student in the University of Life. He loved her to pieces, but he wasn't blind to her flaws. The discovery in my sock drawer came a week after my fall. I was putting laundry away when my hand brushed against a strange lump under the paper liner. It was a small, crudely sewn pouch of dark red cloth tied shut with black thread. My first thought was that it was one of Brenda's new age things, maybe a sachet of lavender she'd left by mistake. But the moment I picked it up, a feeling of absolute dread washed over me. It felt cold, wrong. My fingers trembled as I worked the knot loose. Inside was the collection of horrors: dried, thorny bits of plants, a small, jagged piece of what looked like obsidian, and coiled in the center, a lock of my own salt and pepper hair. I dropped it on the floor as if it had burned me. I knew what it was. I've seen enough late-night movies to know a curse when I see one. And only one person had been in my bedroom recently besides me, Brenda. She'd come over the day before to help me with my laundry, an offer so out of character that I should have been suspicious right then and there. She must have slipped it into the drawer while I was in the kitchen making us iced tea. The bitterness I'd smelled wasn't just burnt herbs, it was the smell of betrayal. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the silence of the big house pressing in on me, my heart thudding a sick rhythm in my chest. Why? Why would my own daughter do this? Was this her idea of a joke? Or did she truly believe she could bring me harm with this little packet of poison? In that moment, staring at that pathetic little hex bag on my hardwood floor, I felt a fear so profound it was almost paralyzing. My own home, my sanctuary, suddenly felt tainted. Every shadow in the corner looked menacing. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a sinister footstep. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. Whoops, that's not right. That's a different story for a different day. What I meant to say is, my daughter thought she had me terrified and backed into a corner. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. My first call wasn't to Brenda. I couldn't bring myself to confront her. What would I even say? Did you put a witchcraft curse on me? It sounded insane, even in my own head. No, my first call was to someone who deals with forces of a different kind. I called Father Michael at St. Jude's Catholic Church. "Eleanor, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. "Father," I said, my own voice a reedy whisper, "I need you to come to my house. I need you to bless it." There was a slight pause. "Is there a particular reason, Eleanor? Has something happened?" I couldn't bring myself to say the word hex. It felt ancient and ridiculous. There's a bad feeling in the house, Father, a darkness. I'm afraid." I sounded like a foolish old woman, I know, but the fear was genuine. Or rather, the fear of what my daughter was capable of was genuine. I needed the comfort of ritual, the solace of my faith to fortify myself for whatever was coming next. Father Michael, bless his heart, didn't question me further. He just said, "I'll be there in an hour." He arrived with his stole and a small bottle of holy water. He walked through every room of my house, from the dusty attic to the damp basement, reciting prayers in a low, resonant voice and sprinkling holy water on the door frames. I followed him like a lost child, clutching my mother's old rosary beads, the smooth, cool wood a small comfort in my hand. I watched him make the sign of the cross in the air of my bedroom where the little pouch of horrors had lain. I didn't tell him about it, of course. I'd swept it up with a piece of cardboard, put it in a Ziploc bag, and hidden it in the garage. Evidence. A part of my brain, the practical part that hadn't been short-circuited by shock, knew I needed to keep it. When the blessing was done, we sat in the kitchen and I made him a cup of tea. He looked at me with kind, knowing eyes. "Eleanor," he said gently, "sometimes the evil we fear isn't in the walls of our house, but in the intentions of the people we let inside." He didn't know the half of it, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. He was right. The house wasn't the problem. 2 days later, Brenda called. "Mom, I heard Father Michael was over. Is everything okay?" Her voice was laced with that practiced, cloying concern. News travels fast in a small parish. "I just felt the house needed a good blessing, dear," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "A blessing? Why? Did something happen?" She pushed. "I just haven't been feeling myself," I hedged. "Ever since my fall. Feeling a little jumpy." "Oh, Mommy," she cooed, and the condescending pet name made the hair on my arm stand up. "I'm so worried about you. You're all alone in that big, drafty old house. Maybe all the old energy in that place is starting to affect you." And there it was, the opening move in her little chess game. "What do you mean, old energy?" I asked, playing dumb. "You know, everything that's happened there. Dad's long illness, his passing. It leaves an imprint, an emotional residue. You're very sensitive to that kind of thing. Maybe that's what you're feeling. Maybe it's not safe for you there anymore. The audacity of it was breathtaking. She plans a hex to make me feel scared and unsafe, and then swoops in to offer the solution to the very problem she created. She wanted me to believe that my grief and the house's energy were making me sick, that I was becoming a feeble old woman losing her marbles. She wasn't just trying to cheat me, she was trying to gaslight me, to dismantle my reality one concerned sentence at a time. I felt a cold fury begin to solidify in my gut, displacing the fear. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in a long, long time, but it was familiar. It was the feeling of a mother bear whose cub is threatened. Except in this case, the cub I needed to protect was myself. Perhaps you're right, Brenda, I said, letting a little tremble enter my voice. It has been awfully lonely and spooky here lately. I heard the tiny, almost imperceptible intake of breath on her end of the line, the sound of a predator sensing its prey as weakening. Well, maybe we should talk, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I have some ideas that might help you feel safe and secure again. I'll come over for dinner tomorrow night. We'll figure it all out. As I hung up the phone, I looked around my quiet, familiar kitchen. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, glinting off the polished wooden floors. The house wasn't dark or evil. It was my fortress, and its queen was not about to be overthrown by a 42-year-old amateur witch with a pile of dead and a serious lack of respect. She thought she was dealing with a frail, superstitious old woman on the verge of a breakdown. She was about to find out how wrong she was. The meal I prepared for Brenda that evening was her favorite: roast chicken with rosemary potatoes and asparagus. It's a meal I've made for her on birthdays, after heartbreaks, and on simple Sunday evenings just because. It felt only fitting to serve her the embodiment of my motherly love while she was plotting to gut my entire life. As I basted the chicken, I rehearsed my lines. I had to be frail, but not completely gone. Scared, but still capable of being led. I had to be the person she needed me to be, the perfect victim for her little play. She arrived wearing a flowing turquoise caftan and enough silver jewelry to set off a metal detector. She'd brought a bottle of organic, sulfite-free red wine that tasted faintly of vinegar. "Mommy, the house feels so much better," she exclaimed, hugging me a little too lightly. "Father Michael must have done the trick. The energy is so much clearer." I gave a weak, watery smile. "I think so, dear. It was kind of you to worry." We sat at the old oak dining table, the same table where she'd once fingerprinted and struggled through her algebra homework. The hypocrisy of it all was so thick I could have cut it with the knife I was using on the chicken. She started in during the salad course. "You know, Mom, I've been doing a lot of reading about energies and how they can get trapped in a place, especially after a trauma, like when we lost Dad." I dutifully dabbed my eyes with a napkin. "I still miss him every day." "I know you do," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And that's the thing. Your grief, combined with the house's memory of his sickness, can create what some people call a psychic weight." A psychic weight. Was that what the kids were calling it these days? I nearly choked on a crouton. I simply nodded, my eyes wide, playing the part of the credulous widow. "And sometimes," she continued, leaning forward, her bracelets jangling, "that weight can attract other things, unsettling things. It might be what's been causing your bad luck, your fall, the refrigerator breaking. It's like the house is turning against you, trying to push you out." She sat back, a self-satisfied little smirk on her face, letting her profound spiritual wisdom sink in. It was quite a performance. She'd clearly rehearsed this speech, connecting all my recent mishaps into a tidy, supernatural narrative with a single convenient conclusion. Eleanor has to go. Push me out? I asked, my voice trembling ever so slightly. But this is my home. It was your home, Mom, she corrected gently. But maybe it's not the right home for you anymore. You deserve to be somewhere safe, somewhere bright and new, without all these sad memories and bad vibes. I was looking into this wonderful community over in Shady Pines. It's more like a resort than a home. They have a pool and water aerobics and social events. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. And there it was, Shady Pines. I knew the place. It was one of the most expensive assisted living facilities in the state. The buy-in fee alone was nearly what my house was worth. My house, which was fully paid off, a legacy Frank had worked his fingers to the bone to leave me with. The money from selling my home would cover the buy-in, and whatever was left over, well, Brenda considered that a finder's fee, I suppose. An inheritance she could cash in while I was still breathing. And what would I do with this big old house? I asked, looking around the dining room with faux confusion. Brenda placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cool. Don't you worry about that for a second. I would handle everything. The sale, the movers, all of it. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. I'll be your real estate agent, your moving coordinator. I just want to see you safe and happy. She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with unshed crocodile tears. The sheer, unmitigated gall. She didn't just want the house. She wanted every last cent I had. I know this part is hard to hear, but it's important. The truth was about to come out, and it was going to be glorious. I pulled my hand back slowly. Oh, Brenda, I sighed, as if succumbing to the weight of her logic. I don't know. It's so much to think about. I'm just so tired. I let my shoulders slump, my whole body radiating defeat. That was the signal she'd been waiting for. She saw me not as her mother, but as a crumbling fortress, and she was the conquering hero. You just rest, Mommy, she said, getting up to clear the plates. Let me take care of this. I'll make some calls tomorrow, get some brochures for Shady Pines, maybe get a realtor to come by for a preliminary appraisal, just to see. No pressure. She left my house that night, convinced she had won. Her kiss on my cheek was one of triumph, not affection. But the curtain had only just fallen on Act 1. The door had barely clicked shut behind her when I stood up and straightened my spine. The frail, frightened old woman dissolved like a mirage. I walked to the liquor cabinet in Frank's old study, poured myself a small glass of the good sherry he saved for special occasions, and raised a toast to the empty room. Nice try, Brenda, but you forgot one thing. I'm not just your mother. I'm Frank Vance's wife, and Frank Vance did not suffer fools. The next thing I did was pick up the phone. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the police. I called the one person in the world I trusted implicitly, my younger sister Caroline, down in Florida. Ellie, what's wrong? You never call this late, she said, her voice sharp with concern. Caroline was my opposite in every way. Where I was quiet and measured, she was a firecracker. A retired legal secretary, she had a mind like a steel trap and a BS detector that was second to none. I can't believe what your niece just tried to pull, I said. And then I told her everything. I told her about the dead rose bush, my fall, the hex bag in my sock drawer, Father Michael's blessing, and the final crowning performance Brenda had just given over a plate of roast chicken. I didn't miss a single condescending mommy. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought we'd been disconnected. Then I heard her take a long, slow breath. That
No good, ungrateful, crystal-waving little witch, she snarled. The venom in her voice was music to my ears. She put a hex on you? A hex? And then tried to talk you into shady pines? Oh, Eleanor, I am getting on the next flight up there.
No, stay put for now, I said, a smile finally breaking across my face. It felt good to have an ally. I don't need a soldier yet. I need a co-conspirator. She thinks I'm a scared old lady who's losing her mind. She's counting on it. Well, you're not, Carol said fiercely. You're the sharpest woman I know. Exactly, I said, taking a sip of my sherry. The warmth spread through my chest, chasing away the last of the chill from Brenda's visit. She wants my house and my money, and she's willing to use cheap theatrics and emotional manipulation to get it. She has no idea what she just started. So what's the plan, Ellie? What are you going to do? I looked at the framed photo of Frank on the mantelpiece, his kind eyes smiling at me. He'd always told me that the best way to deal with a bully was to outsmart them, not outshout them. First thing tomorrow morning, I said, my voice now hard as steel, I'm calling my lawyer, Martin Webb, and I'm changing my will. The next morning, I woke up feeling a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The pretense of frailty was gone, replaced by a cold, methodical purpose. While Brenda was likely waking up in her overpriced apartment, dreaming of real estate commissions and a fat inheritance, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a fresh legal pad and a second cup of coffee, outlining my counteroffensive. She wanted a war. Fine. But I was the one with the home field advantage. My first call, as promised, was to Martin Webb. Martin had been our family's lawyer for decades. He'd helped Frank with his business contracts and handled our wills after Brenda was born. He was a creature of habit, as reliable as the sunrise, and his voice was the same dry, comforting rustle it had always been. Eleanor, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Everything is about to be, Martin. I need to come in and see you. I want to make some substantial changes to my will. Substantial? He asked, a hint of professional curiosity in his tone. That's one word for it, I said. Brenda is about to get a lesson in the consequences of her actions. I gave him the short version, sparing no detail of the hex bag and the Shady Pines proposal. He listened without interruption, a skill all good lawyers possess. When I finished, there was a pause. Well, he finally said, and I could practically hear him shaking his head in his quiet mahogany-paneled office. That's monumentally foolish of her. That's one word for it, I repeated. Frank always said Brenda was more crafty than she was smart. She's finally proven him right. Can you see me this afternoon? For this, Eleanor, I'll clear my calendar. As I got ready to go to his office, I moved with a new energy. I chose one of my best suits, a navy blue wool crepe number, and styled my hair carefully. I looked in the mirror and saw not a confused old woman, but a commander preparing for battle. I was taking control of the narrative Brenda tried to write for me. She had cast me as the victim. I was about to recast myself as the victor. Later that afternoon, in Martin's office, the process was swift and satisfyingly final. With a few strokes of a pen and the signatures of two of his paralegals as witnesses, the transfer of my earthly possessions upon my death was completely rewritten. My house, my savings, Frank's pension, my stocks and bonds, every last dime and every last shingle of the roof over my head was to go not to my daughter, Brenda Vance, but to a trust for my sister, Caroline, with the instruction that she use it for her own care in her old age and for the benefit of her two wonderful, well-adjusted grandchildren. Brenda's name was mentioned only once. And to my daughter, Brenda Vance, for reasons known to her,
I leave the sum of $1, along with the contents of the Ziploc bag currently in my safe deposit box. He looked up at me over his spectacles. The hex bag, I presume. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. The very one. Let's see what kind of abundance that brings her. Eleanor, are you sure about this? Martin asked, his duty as a lawyer compelling him to make sure. Disinheriting your only child is a significant step. Martin, my daughter tried to use witchcraft and psychological warfare to scare me into a nursing home so she could steal my money. This isn't a step, it's a leap, and I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He nodded slowly, accepting my resolve. All right then, it's done. Leaving his office, I felt lighter than I had in ages. I hadn't just changed a legal document, I had drawn a line in the sand. I had protected myself, my home, and Frank's legacy. It was a purely defensive maneuver, of course. Phase 1. Phase 2 was going to be a little more proactive. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. Don't go anywhere. Oh, for heaven's sake, she was about to get what she deserved. Honestly, my mind must be wandering. Let's get back to it.
A week passed. Brenda called every other day, a steady drip of poison in my ear. She had brochures from Shady Pines that she wanted to drop off. A lovely real estate agent named Tiffany, a, quote, dear friend, was just dying to come by and give me a free market analysis of the house. No obligation, of course, she'd chirp, just so we know what we're working with. I put her off with a series of believable excuses. Oh, my bridge club is meeting here today. My sciatica is acting up terribly. I just can't have visitors. The plumber is coming to look at the garburator. I needed to let her get a little more desperate, a little more invested in her plan. The genius of her scheme, I had to admit, was its simplicity. If she could convince me, and by extension everyone else, that I was getting frail and dotty, no one would question it when I decided to sell the house and turn over control of my finances to my loving, attentive daughter. The hex was the catalyst, the story she could whisper to her friends. Poor Mom, she's really not herself. She's talking about curses and bad energy. It's for the best, really. By framing me as superstitious and senile, she made herself look like the dutiful, caring child. Well, it was time to flip that script. My sister, Caroline, provided the next move. Allie, she had said on the phone the night before, remember Mrs. Gable, your next-door neighbor? The one who waters her petunias every morning at precisely 8:15 and knows everything that happens on your street? Lillian Gable, I said. Her eyes are more effective than a security camera. Exactly, Carol replied. People like that are an untapped resource. She's the town crier in sensible shoes. You need to give her something to cry about. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. The next morning, I waited until I saw Lillian out in her garden snipping away at her prize-winning dahlias. Then I put my own plan into action. I went into the hall closet and pulled out a box of old salt, the kind you use for melting ice on the sidewalk in winter. I walked out my front door in my housecoat and slippers, my hair deliberately uncombed, and began to walk a wobbly, erratic circle around my prize rosebush, the one that had mysteriously died. As I walked, I began sprinkling a thick, obvious line of salt on the grass. It took less than a minute. Lillian's snipping paused. I could feel her eyes on me. I kept going, mumbling to myself, making sure my voice was just loud enough to carry across the pristine lawn that separated our properties. Out, out, dark spirits, leave this good earth, be gone, vile energy, no more curses in this house.
I completed the circle, then stood back, admiring my work as if I'd just completed a masterpiece. I could see Lillian out of my corner of the eye, half hidden behind a large hydrangea, her trowel frozen in midair. I gave a loud, theatrical sigh of relief and tottered back inside, shutting the door firmly behind me. I went straight to the living room window and peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, Lillian had abandoned her flowers and was power walking across the street to talk to Mrs. Henderson from number 42. By lunchtime, I figured the entire neighborhood would know that poor Eleanor Vance had finally completely lost her marbles. An hour later, as predicted, my phone rang. It was Brenda. Her voice was practically vibrating with a panicked, triumphant energy. "Mom, are you okay?" She said Lillian Gable just called me. She said you were outside sprinkling salt and talking about curses? The house just feels so heavy, Brenda, I whimpered into the phone. Ever since Father Michael came, it's like it stirred things up. The presence feels angry. The salt is for protection. There was a silence on her end, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. This was it. This was the final piece of evidence she needed. I had just handed her the smoking gun. "Mom," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "Oh, Mom, I'm coming over. We need to talk. We need to get you out of there. I'm calling Tiffany. We'll get her over there this afternoon." "All right, Brenda," I whispered, sounding utterly defeated. "I'm just so scared."
I hung up the phone and permitted myself a small, tight smile. The fish was on the hook. Now it was time to start reeling her in. An hour later, Brenda's sensible sedan pulled into my driveway, followed by a sleek, black luxury SUV with a vanity plate that read SLS Fast. Tiffany, I presumed. My heart gave a little flutter, not of fear, but of anticipation. It was showtime. I opened the door before Brenda could even knock, playing the part of the anxious, slightly dazed mother. I had a shawl wrapped tightly around my shoulders, even though it was warm inside, and I clutched a half-empty mug of what I hoped looked like lukewarm chamomile tea. "Brenda, you came," I said, my voice a little too high, a little too thin. Brenda rushed in and wrapped me in a hug that was more restraining than affectionate. "Of course I came, Mom. I told you I would." She looked past me to the woman walking up the path. Tiffany was exactly as I'd imagined. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit, with a smile so white it looked like a row of chiclets. She practically vibrated with aggressive competence. "Mom, this is my friend Tiffany," Brenda said, her hand on my back, steering me into the living room as if I were a piece of delicate furniture. "Tiffany, this is my mother, Eleanor." "It's an absolute pleasure to meet you, Eleanor," Tiffany said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, her nails perfect. "Brenda has told me so much about you, and this house, oh, it has just fabulous bones." I just blinked at her. "The bones are angry," I said in a quiet, spooky voice. Brenda shot me a look, a quick flash of annoyance, followed by a syrupy, pitying smile for Tiffany's benefit. Mom's just been a little sensitive lately. It's been a lot for her to handle this place all by herself. "Oh, of course. I completely understand. That's what I'm here for, to make this whole process as painless as possible. Shall we have a look around?" What followed was one of the most surreal hours of my life. I trailed behind them as they swept through my home, a home where every corner held a memory for me, but for them was just a collection of assets and liabilities. Tiffany was a whirlwind of realtor speak in the kitchen. Great footprint, a little dated, of course. We'd probably recommend a coat of neutral gray paint and taking down this wallpaper. Buyers today want a blank canvas. The wallpaper she was disparaging was a cheerful yellow print Frank and I had picked out and hung ourselves one disastrous but hilarious Saturday afternoon.
in Frank's study. Excellent potential for a home office. And these built-ins, gorgeous. We just need to stage it properly. Get rid of all this dark, heavy furniture. Make it feel bright and modern. She was talking about Frank's beloved mahogany desk and his worn leather reading chair. I felt a surge of pure rage, but I swallowed it down and focused on my role. He sat in that chair the day he died, I whispered, pointing a shaky finger at it. Brenda quickly took my arm. Mom, let's not talk about that now. Let Tiffany do her job. They were so busy patting themselves on the back, so sure they had me cornered. Tiffany pulled out her clipboard, ready to deliver the final blow. But the final blow wasn't going to be hers to deliver. It was going to be mine. You're going to want to hear this. When they had seen every room, every closet, every so-called fabulous bone, we all settled at the dining room table where Brenda had tried to sell me on my own ruin just a week earlier. Tiffany clicked her pen and opened a glossy folder filled with charts and figures. Okay, Eleanor, she started, her voice radiating confidence. Based on the square footage, the neighborhood comps, and the current market, which is incredibly hot right now, I'd recommend listing the property at a competitive price point to generate a quick sale. With a few minor cosmetic updates, paint, staging, decluttering, I am confident we could have a signed offer in hand within 30 days. That's wonderful, Tiffany, Brenda gushed. She reached over and patted my hand again. I resisted the urge to snatch it away. Isn't that wonderful, Mom? So fast! You could be settled in your new place before Thanksgiving.
Tiffany slid a multi-page document across the table toward me. This is just the standard listing agreement, she said breezily. It gives me the exclusive right to sell the property. If you just sign here on the bottom line, I can have a photographer here by Friday. I stared at the paper, at the little line where my signature was supposed to go. This was it, the final moment of the masquerade. Brenda was leaning forward in her chair, a vulture poised to strike, her eyes shining with greed. I picked up the pen Tiffany offered. I held it over the paper. And then I set it down again, deliberately, next to the document. I looked up, first at Tiffany, then I let my gaze settle on my daughter. I sat up straight, my shoulders back, the shawl suddenly feeling ridiculous, so I shrugged it off and placed it on the back of my chair. The tremble left my voice. My hands, which I'd kept clasped together to feign anxiety, now rested calmly on the table. The transformation was so sudden and so complete that both of them just stared at me. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room with the force of a slammed door. Brenda's smile faltered. What did you say, Mom?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice as crisp and clear as a frosty autumn morning. "Thank you for your time, Tiffany, but I won't be needing your services. I will not be selling my house, not today. Not ever." Tiffany looked utterly bewildered, her professional composure cracking. She glanced at Brenda, as if to say, "Control your crazy mother." "Mommy, what are you talking about?" Brenda said, her voice a frantic hiss. "You're confused. We talked about this. The bad energy, the spirits. You aren't safe here." This was the moment I had been waiting for. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with hers. "Oh, the spirits are very real, Brenda, but they aren't in the walls. They're sitting right here at my table." The color drained from Brenda's face. I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" I let a cold smile touch my lips. "Let me refresh your memory. It started with a dead rose bush, a broken refrigerator, a convenient tumble down the stairs,
And it was all designed to culminate in me finding a pathetic little red pouch in my sock drawer, a little bag filled with thorns, a piece of black rock, and a lock of my own hair that you snipped from my brush when you pretended to help me with the laundry. Brenda's jaw dropped. She looked like I had physically slapped her. Tiffany's head was swiveling back and forth between us as if she were watching a tennis match. You're delusional," she stammered, falling back on her original script. "You're making things up. I knew this was a bad idea, Tiffany. I'm so sorry. My mother, she's not well." "Oh, I'm never better, dear. And I'm not delusional. I have the evidence. That disgusting little hex bag is quite safe." I paused, letting the reality of her exposure sink in. You know, I asked myself why my own daughter, the child I raised and loved and supported, would do something so monstrous. And then you sat right here in this very chair and told me, Shady Pines, a quick sale, a daughter who would benevolently manage my money for me. You didn't want to save me, Brenda. You wanted to rob me. Just as Brenda opened her mouth to deny it all, to try and gaslight me one last time, the doorbell rang, loud and clear through the house. Brenda and Tiffany jumped. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "Right on time," I said. I stood up and walked to the front door. I opened it to reveal my sister Caroline, looking fabulous in a red jacket, with a small carry-on suitcase at her feet. She had, in fact, gotten on the next flight. Carol breezed past me, with a look of thunder on her face. She walked right into the dining room, dropped her purse on the table, and fixed her eyes on her niece. "Brenda," she said, her voice dripping with ice, "you look surprised to see me. It's amazing what you can arrange with one phone call. My flight from Florida was lovely. Now, what's this I hear about you trying to scare your mother to death?" Brenda was speechless, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. Tiffany looked at the newcomer, at my composed demeanor, and at the crumbling facade of my daughter. You could see the moment she understood. She hadn't been brought in to help a sick old woman. She had been brought in to be an unwitting pawn in a despicable con. I walked back to the head of the table and took my seat, the rightful queen on her throne.
"Tiffany," I said calmly, "I am so sorry you were brought into the middle of this unfortunate family matter. Your professional services are no longer required. Caroline, would you be a dear and show Miss Patterson the door?" I looked at my daughter, whose world was visibly collapsing. "As for you, Brenda, don't you move a muscle. You and I are just getting started." Caroline, who never needed an invitation to take charge, fixed Tiffany with a look that could curdle milk. "I believe my sister said you were leaving," she said, her voice dangerously sweet. "Don't worry, I know the way out." Tiffany scrambled to gather her glossy folder and expensive pen, her eyes darting between me, Brenda, and my formidable sister. "Yes, of course, I am so sorry for this intrusion," she stammered, directing the apology to me. She clearly understood who was in power now. As Caroline escorted a visibly rattled Tiffany to the door, I turned my full attention back to my daughter. Brenda sat frozen, her face pale with shock. The calculating predator was gone, replaced by a cornered, panicked animal. "Mom, please," she whispered, "this is a misunderstanding. I was worried about you. Everything I did because I love you." I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp, humorless sound, Love? Is that what you call it? Terrifying your own mother? Trying to gaslight her into thinking she's losing her mind so you can sell her home out from under her and bleed her bank accounts dry? That's not love, Brenda. In the right light, that's a crime. I believe the term is elder abuse. Caroline returned to the dining room, shutting the door behind her with a definitive click. She stood behind me, a silent, unshakable reinforcement. Your little realtor friend was practically hyperventilating. I don't think she'll be back for a second opinion. Brenda burst into tears. It was an abrupt, dramatic performance, complete with shuddering shoulders and gulping sobs. How can you be so cruel to me? I'm your daughter. All I wanted was to make sure you were taken care of. This was her last line of defense, the appeal to my maternal guilt. A month ago, it might have worked, but the woman she was trying to manipulate no longer existed. Stop it, Brenda, my voice cutting through her sobs and silencing them instantly. The theatrics are over. The audience has gone home. I saw you for what you were when you held my hand and lied to my face. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I'd become so old and frail that I'd just meekly hand over everything Frank and I worked our entire lives for? I stood up and walked over to the sideboard where I picked up the Ziploc bag containing her pathetic little curse. I held it up. This was your big plan? Some sticks and stones from the garden and a psychic weight. You watched too many bad movies, dear. You underestimated me, and you completely forgot who my sister is. Carolyn stepped forward. You should know, Brenda. I spent 34 years working for probate attorneys. I know exactly what you were trying to do, and I know exactly how a judge would see this little exhibit. She tapped the plastic bag with a manicured nail. Attempted fraud, undue influence, it's all very ugly, and it tends to get in the papers. Brenda finally seemed to grasp the true depth of the hole she had dug for herself. Fear replaced the manufactured sorrow in her eyes. You wouldn't, she breathed. You're my family. Family? I asked, walking back to the table. You stopped being my family in any meaningful way when you chose to treat me like a mark, an obstacle between you and my money. You were so worried about securing your future inheritance, Brenda, that it never occurred to you that you had to actually earn it, or at least not try to steal it while I was still alive. I sat back down, placing the bag on the table between us like a centerpiece. I want you to know that your concern for my future affairs was not in vain. It inspired me. After you left the other night, after you spun your ghost stories and tried to sell me on a glorified prison with a putting green, I did some financial planning of my own. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I called Martin Webb. I said simply. The recognition of our lawyer's name was a fresh blow. I saw it land. I went to his office the very next day, and I drew up a new will. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. It's funny, really, I continued in a calm, conversational tone. You wanted this house and everything in it so badly. You were willing to desecrate my peace of mind and my memories to get it. Now it will be preserved, just as it is, cared for by someone who actually values family. It and every other asset to my name will be going to Caroline and her grandchildren. The blood drained from her face, leaving a sickly, waxy pallor. No, she whispered, you can't. I'm your daughter. I'm your only child. A title, not a lifetime guarantee, Caroline sniffed from behind me. Oh, but I didn't forget you, Brenda, I said, leaning in for the final, satisfying thrust of the knife. I left you a little something to remember me by. My new will stipulates that you are to receive the sum of $1. And, for your spiritual well-being, I pushed the Ziploc bag across the table toward her. The full contents of this bag. Don't spend it all in one place.
It was a mortal blow. She finally broke, not with tears, but with a choked, guttural sound of pure rage and disbelief. You can't do this, she shrieked, jumping to her feet. I'll fight it. I'll tell them you're incompetent, that you've lost your mind, that she jabbed a finger at Caroline, manipulated you. Go ahead and try, I said, my voice calm and unshaken. Who do you think a judge will believe? The crazy old woman who managed to uncover a conspiracy against her and protect her own assets? Or the loving daughter with a mountain of debt who planted a curse on her own mother? I even have a witness. I imagine Tiffany the realtor would be more than happy to give a deposition about the conversation we just had. She seems like someone who would want to stay on the right side of the law. The fight went out of her, replaced by the hollow emptiness of absolute defeat. She slumped back into her chair, a puppet with its strings cut. She had lost, utterly and completely. I stood up one last time. Caroline will walk you to your car. I want you to leave your key to this house on the table before you go. It wasn't a request. She stared at the key in her hand as if she'd never seen it before. Then, with a shaking hand, she unhooked it from her key ring and let it fall to the table. The small clatter of metal on wood was the sound of the end. She didn't look at me as she left. When the front door closed, the silence that fell was different. It wasn't the lonely, heavy silence of before. It was a clean, peaceful silence. The air felt lighter. My house was finally mine again. Caroline came back into the room and put a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay, Ellie? I looked around my dining room, at the familiar wallpaper, the sideboard Frank had refinished, the chairs that had held 3 generations of our family. I took a deep, steadying breath. Carol, I said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. For a very long time, I think I'm better than okay. My daughter thought my age made me weak, my love made me blind, and my home made me a prisoner. She was wrong. My age gave me wisdom, my love gave me strength, and my home was my fortress. She thought she could cast a spell on me, but in the end, the only thing she managed to do was make herself disappear.
So another story of my grandmother has end, and be clicking here you will have when more such stories.